All right, I believe that we're now rolling. This is exciting. I see people starting to join, so that's always a good sign. Give them a
It's
couple
good sign
seconds.
number one.
Yeah, exactly. We'll give them a couple seconds to start coming in, then we'll get going. Hope everyone's having a great Saturday.
Yeah, it's actually 5 p.m. here for me, so it's almost my dinner time.
Oh
You're in the
man.
future. Oh my
I am in the
gosh.
future. It's no different, trust.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and get things rolling, and then that way we can get into our good questions and everything. Again, a reminder that this is being recorded, so if you're watching this in the future, further than Meg's future, enjoy. My name is Matt Buchholtz. I'm the global community lead at League of Legends, and I'm really excited to be facilitating this panel today. We've got some amazing guests, and excited to bring you some insight as we talk about how we can work together to build and elevate inclusive gaming spaces and communities. So I would like to go ahead and have our other panelists introduce themselves. Meg, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. My name is Megan Everett. I'm the community director for Warframe. I've been at Digital Extremes for over 10 years now on the community team. Very excited to be chatting with Matt and Julian that I actually got to meet in person not too long ago in December of last year. So this is like a little reunion. So really just excited to talk community. I could talk all day, every day about community. So now I get to everyone has to listen to me.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name's Julian. Yeah, I am the global community lead on 2XKO, formerly known as Project L. I have like a very interesting path to gaming. So I've been in community for the past 4 years, but before that, I actually went to school and was a professional dancer. So it's yeah, it's a very, very weird path that I found myself here, but it actually makes like a lot of sense now. So I think I have like a pretty like unique perspective when it comes to community and like have lived in a lot of different spaces. And I'm really just excited. I am a giant nerd about like community and how we can bring people together across like cultural boundaries. So when I heard about this opportunity, I was super excited. So I'm very glad to be here.
Yeah, Megan, I'd love to hear your path to like getting into community and gaming as well, because I know a lot of people who tune in are looking to pursue a career in this field or are very interested in adjacent fields. And I just find that people working in both gaming and community have like very interesting paths that have gotten them there.
Yeah, mine was very, I'll use the word luck because it really was. My background is actually marketing. I have a marketing degree from my local college in London, Ontario. And then I just met Rebecca, who is now our creative director, just through mutual friends, and we hit it off. And I've been playing video games my entire life, in my basement playing Zelda on my N64, scaring myself because it's Majora's Mask is a scary game. And then when I met Reb, she, when we'd hang out, she would tell me like, "Oh, I can't hang out. I got to go to, Gamescom in Germany." And I'm like, "What do you even do? Like, I don't understand your job." And then she told me she works video games, and I honestly didn't even know that our city of London had a video game studio. We've always been kind of private within our own space, but when she recognized that I am a huge video game nerd, she asked me to be on the team because at that time for Warframe, it was just starting founders, and she was the only person running community at that time. And then she's like, "I need help drastically because the game is taking off positively," and asked me to be a part of it. And I, at that point, I kind of dabbled in, forums and kind of those kind of communities back then. And so for her to take me on and take me under her wing, she taught me everything I know and who I am today for that side of things. But yeah, I just was such a huge gaming nerd, and then saw an opportunity to grow that, and Reb took me on and took a chance with me, and now I'm still here.
That's amazing. For me, I grew up in like a super small town, so community for me was always like, how do I get the most people possible to do something? Because
so
it
true.
was very boring otherwise. Like the amount of things I did, like I taught myself how to juggle with dirt clods and would fish down at the creek. It was very rural life. And so
Dang.
finding ways to like get people hyped about something was like always part of my life. And when I moved to bigger and bigger cities, Seattle and then LA, more and more opportunities happened of how can I get more people excited, or oh, this is a little bit more niche, but there are now enough people to do something. Like trying to play Magic the Gathering in my hometown, it was me versus me. Playing Magic the Gathering in LA, it's me versus thousands. So it's a little
Mm.
a little bit more of a exciting time. And I found my way into gaming. Like I'd always wanted to do gaming, but it didn't exist because I'm very old. And so I could only take C++. That was the closest thing to gaming, and that wasn't for me. So it wasn't until much later that I ended up being a game journalist for Electronic Gaming Monthly, and then found my way to tie that love for gaming and community together at a place called Vision Entertainment that worked with Echo Fox and a couple other esports teams. And so now at Riot, very excited to be working on that. But yeah, also I see some people chatting. Amazing, love seeing that. I know that everyone in this call is very used to reading chat as well as we do things. But we will also be having a Q&A at the very end. So if you have any big questions, feel free to put them in that little Q&A tab you see there, and we'll be able to access that as we hit the end of the panel. But let's start diving into things. So I'd like to start with like, how have digital communities really shifted the way that we connect as a whole? Because again, going from very in-person spaces to now digital spaces, that's the biggest possible reach that we can have. So I'd love to just kind of hear from both of you of how you think that that's really changed the way that we connect person to person.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that. It's kind of it's crazy how different it has grown and how many different evolving platforms we kind of have at our disposal to be able to connect with people like all over the world at any time, future, not past, well maybe past, but like anyone all over the world we have access to communicating with now. And the platforms that allow you to kind of have that one-to-one like real-time interaction are the ones that personally excite me the most. You can just get that instant feedback or those instant discussions, or someone needs help, they can reach out to you. And we live in a world now where I think, as much as we want to say we're constantly online, be that opening our phone every now and then, wait for your toast to pop, you open your phone, look at your Twitter, whatever it is, and we're constantly online and looking at what's happening around us. And the fact that where we are now and we have all these platforms that we can use to talk to people, I think is incredible. And being able to talk to someone that is having problems or just wants to talk about anything, we have the means to do it, and they have access to us, not 24/7, but a lot of the times they know that, we'll read their message when we can get to it, when we're awake or whatever it may be. And it's a really definitely prosperous like back and forth interaction that we can have now, as opposed to even 10 years ago. We didn't have Discord really 10 years ago. We were one of the first peoples on Twitch streaming, and like that was huge. And now we're where we are now, and we have all these different communities, almost like different communities and different platforms, right? You kind of know who you're talking to when you're on Twitch doing a live chat, kind of who you're talking to on Discord. And we've kind of shifted in those kind of different avenues to be able to connect with people all over the world.
Yeah, it's really crazy to think about, and especially recently with like the advent of COVID, I feel like the whole world kind of had to really adjust to it. But I think for me specifically, like, I mean, I mentioned earlier, but the switch from kind of like dance into gaming, it seems kind of drastic, but for my whole life, my social life has been online. I started playing Final Fantasy 11 when I was 11. It was like 20 years ago. And I remember I moved from New York to Arizona. And when you're like 11, 12 years old and you move away, you kind of lose touch with a lot of those friends. But everybody that I was friends with on Final Fantasy 11, I am still friends with today. It's crazy. And from all over the world, because those were integrated servers. So as things like TeamSpeak, Ventrilo, Discord were starting to pop up, I was there staying in touch with all of my gamer friends from around the world. So I think that put me in a really unique position when COVID did happen, and there were more opportunities in the gaming space, and that had already been my life for the past 20 years. So it was really easy for me to kind of step in and maybe educate people who hadn't grown up like this, and how to build those communities, because a lot of us have been doing it, on our own outside of a company for the past few years.
Yeah, I think you hit a really good point with like COVID shifting that community space digitally, and also just the progress of life. Like for me, again, being a very old person,
Gotta stop saying that about yourself, Matt.
I'm horrendously old.
No.
I grew up with like all of my gaming friends doing LAN parties. We'd pack all of our giant monitors into like a single room and overload a fuse box and just play Star Wars Galaxies or Counter-Strike or whatever. And those same friends, as we graduate college, got older, moved across the US. Some of us are in Montana, some in Washington, so, I'm in California. But as we found ourselves in those spaces, we were on MIRC back then. It was the Discord of the time. And we were able to stay in touch through that space and still play those same games together. So it was this real natural space for us to continue our friendship no matter the distance or time. And those are still people that I keep in touch with today, which is really kind of fun and exciting.
Yeah, unfortunately, MSN Messenger didn't survive the the years. That was my kind of vibe.
Oh my gosh. It's funny that you mentioned that though, Matt, about kind of like having a bunch of LAN parties. It's kind of like cyclical though, because what you see now, like Evo last year was the biggest Evo that has ever happened, where you see like a lot of fan fests around games happening, and the turnout of those have been like recordly high. I think because we index so extremely into digital communities, there's a real appetite for like the human in-person connection lately too.
So I think then what I'd like us to start talking about is like, how do those like moments, whether it be digital or in person, really give us the space for like empathy and understanding as we form those communities or work with those communities? Because I know all of us have kind of had those times where we are engaging in person with the communities that we represent, or like Megan was saying, we get hit up on a Twitter DM or in a Discord channel or added on Reddit. So how do we really find that space to form those connections and provide those interactions?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, because like taking a step back and looking at like gaming in general is, a lot of times, especially when it's cooperative, you have your avatar, and that is the first impression of you that anyone gets. And this avatar that you've customized is just, it has nothing kind of to do with like, if people don't immediately know your identities, maybe it's expressed some way through your avatar, but they're basing you, they're interacting with you kind of blind, right? So it allows for this opportunity for you to really understand and empathize with someone completely separated from identity. And once you build those connections, it allows you to go one step further and then really be understanding and ask questions from like a place of curiosity. I think specifically, like when we have opportunities to talk to people through DM or through like Twitter, on Discord, etc., it we mentioned it before, but you can really cross like cultural boundaries and space and time. Essentially, they can be from a whole nother country. And I think the biggest thing to really center like empathy, especially in our crafted community, is coming from a place of understanding, or of trying to understand, because we might not be able to understand, but we can empathize, right? And I think, even I'm sure y'all could agree, like sometimes very passionate people will have some very, very intense feedback, but trying to really center that in empathy of like, okay, like what are they feeling? Like why do they have that feedback? There's obviously like a lot of care here if they feel so strongly about something. So yeah, that's the biggest thing that I try to think of when we're interacting online. And then I think in person is like the next step, right? Like if you establish that relationship online, that familiarity, it's almost like it's just the weirdest feeling in the world to meet someone in person that you feel like you already know, and it's really exciting.
Yeah, you honestly hit the head on the nail on the head. It's 5 p.m. No, you would capitalize that. I had very similar thoughts as well. For Warframe, we've been around for almost 11 years now, and we have people who have played the game from the very beginning that are still playing the game, or left, come back, whatever their life takes them, and that's totally fine. And you have players that are so, like you said, so passionate about your game. And it's really important, I think, for us on community to establish those lines of passionate and maybe a bit more negative, or there's two sides to everything. But coming from a space of, okay, this person is passionate, and maybe they share their story with you about how Warframe or a game on Riot, Runeterra, maybe how it changed their lives or how it impacted their lives, and they are coming at a place from passion and wanting to see the game succeed. And it's about being able to take what they're saying and really break it down a little bit more in terms of, this isn't just them saying, this character is bad. It's, why do they think that way? Do they have a personal connection to this character? Oh, I look at their profile. This is their most played character they've ever had. So there's a reason behind this. And having empathy when it is hard to exist on the internet. It's hard to form those connections and, really try to not break people down into like trying to dissect them into why they're feeling the way they're feeling. But being on community, it's really our job to make sure that those people feel heard in a respectful way, a professional way. But like you said, Julian, forming those connections with players, and then being able to kind of see that relationship grow is something that I'm very thankful for what we do. And being able to kind of add inclusivity alongside that as well, and hear different stories from different people and try to incorporate that into the games that we make and we develop is a very big goal of mine, at least as a director of this game.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting too, when we create these communities or like enter into these communities, if we're starting later, there's so much that already exists within those spaces, and finding a way to be a part of that community but also allow it to exist on its own is kind of a really special challenge, and something that takes a lot of work to build out, because the last thing you want to do as a company or even as an individual is come in and assert what you think is right for this community to exist. And I think that that's a really important factor that working in community has really taught me of how to appreciate those spaces and find what makes them special for the people there. And you have to listen to do that, and you have to really be observant to do that. Those aren't things that can be very prescriptive. It has to be that unique space. And so one thing that I'd like to kind of dive into is, when a space has been established that you're working in as a community manager, how do you identify those things, or how do you work with the pre-existing community to really empower them and give them a space where they can have those connections and form those meaningful relationships?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Like, I know for us being 11 years old, that's especially difficult because, our game has changed drastically over 11 years. And, we tried the PvP thing, didn't work out. We're more of a PvE game. That's fine. But, you have those schools of players that, like that, want that, demand that. And I think I feel like it's very different game to game as well, right? Like there's certain communities that cozy gamers, the multiplayer gamers, and there might not be crossover all the time, but there people dab a little bit here and there in variety. But for us, I know when we have trying to foster new communities or new community spaces, most recently we launched on iOS for the first time, and so we have this new thank you no we thank you, we have this new essentially platform of players that are playing on iOS. And it's been such a long time since we've put our game on a different platform because we're on them all, and then we're like, oh, we got the phone. So now that we're on iOS, it's, you know, looking at that space of players, and those are a different school of players than people like me who sit at my desk and play. They're on their phone, they're on the bus, they're, you know, on the toilet, wherever it is they need to be. Like they're different school of players. And you know, it's, I like to think that us as a community team, we are kind of a constant in terms of how we choose to communicate with our players, and being very, we want people to know that we're not robots, right? Like we're humans too. We play the game exactly how you play it, and we believe in the game and support the game. And we're here to be your friends, but we're also here to be your community team and make sure that, you know, your issues are solved or heard, or whatever that may be. And so trying to kind of, I guess, you know, build up a new community is, at least for us, is very, our community is like, they'll kind of come in without us and kind of help out, which is obviously a blessing, and they'll kind of take the charge there, and then we're there as well. But um it's it's hard, it's not easy for sure to want to, you know, bring something that you built for so long somewhere new. It's a challenge.
Yeah. I think, okay, Megan, you said something about kind of like the community like coming in. And I
Yeah.
think that that is so important, because I think when you foster a really good community, like you meet them where they're at, and
Mm.
they're kind of like really, you're there as like a support character to them, right?
We're an
Like
NPC, they're the main character.
exactly. I think what kind of happens, and I think what sometimes goes wrong in like the gaming industry, is when like the idea of community is like, we are going to set the tone. Like it's like my way or the highway. You should feel this. Like you should be doing this. Like this is the proper way to play the game. But when you really sit back and you actually like listen, you discover things about your game that maybe you didn't intend. Like that is one of the superpowers that like a dev team with like a really good like community strategy has, is they're able to actually adapt and like find out things about their own communities in their own games. um Matt, you talked about like going into communities versus like building them yourself. Like when I was working at Nexon, I got to launch a game. It's called Konosuba Fantastic Days. I'm a giant weeb. I love anime. I was super excited to work on that. And it was really cool because when you see people really passionate about the game, you can help elevate them to create their own community. So rather than saying like, oh, this person is the voice of the community, being like, okay, like how can I give them the tools to actually like let other people know how dope they are, because they're like a really kind human being. They have a really open, inclusive mindset. Like because of that, they're going to really have people rally around them. What can I do to make it better for them? Can I work with our dev team to give them like an API to build out their community? Can I give them assets so that they're not spending, 20 hours in Photoshop to like scrape the official assets, right? Like it's
I
things
know
that we
that
can
reference.
do. It's, a little thing really goes a long way. And then when you join a community that's already established, like, when I jumped onto, when you enter the Riot ecosystem, which is really big, and like Legends of Runeterra, one thing that I really tried to do was like look at those communities that have existed, but maybe haven't had like a spotlight on them yet, and then connect them with the bigger communities that already exist. Like finding really passionate players and then being like, hey, I actually have the contact information of like maybe the top like influencer or creator, and I think you guys could really make something cool together. I'm going to intro you. And I think that type of like connection, like I like playing matchmaker as a community manager.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And I I really agree that like finding those different spaces is really important as a community manager, because even within a game, right, you might have your main Discord or your main subreddit, but there are going to be X amount of others. And so I think I always look at like Final Fantasy 14 has all the professions, and guaranteed every profession has a subreddit, and every profession has a guaranteed at least two Discords. And they all have their individual influencers and their individual tastemakers, and each one has a different perspective of why something is important. You might play a certain class for a complete meme reason, but there could be tens of thousands of people doing that for that reason. And so finding out what those are is really important. And I enjoyed kind of being like an embed within those groups, so that as things happen and I hear, oh, this is coming down the road for the games that I work on, great, maybe I can connect them and bring them in on something. Maybe I can really find ways to celebrate them. And it's always kind of a fun thing for me when it's like, oh yeah, we've got this thing happening with X, Y, or Z character, and I know that they're getting a moment soon. And being able to talk to those people and kind of let them have that moment of being able to share that with the community and giving them the stage to kind of be the people to break that news is something really exciting to me, because they're the ones who are putting in that passion and that like energy towards that character at that moment anyway, and to be able to celebrate that with them is really cool. Let's see, I've got questions.
We've got answers, Matt. Sometimes.
So
Sometimes.
I would love to start diving in on where do we see like a role that we can play in promoting positive social change, or like really encouraging inclusion and supporting diversity in like the gaming and community space.
I think so. This is one that I'm very passionate about this, and I think you mentioned Final Fantasy 14, and one thing that I think Final Fantasy 14 really does well that contributes to how good the community is that this is from like a game design and like procedural level. Like I'm a huge Final Fantasy 14 fan. Like I a full disclosure. But like in the game, if you join a dungeon and there's a brand new player, you will get double the rewards. And that instantly sends to you like, oh my gosh, I'm really glad we have a newbie here. And then even though it takes a little bit extra time to teach them how to do this dungeon or how to get through this encounter, you're getting rewarded for it. Like you're actually saving time in terms of how you feel, right? And I think systems like that make it really friendly to build communities. And then along with that too, when we talk about diversity and inclusion, like it's just really having processes in place and really advocating for that in your development teams of when we're building, especially characters that really reflect like the world that we live in, when we're building this, like, are we actually building a game in which everybody who could be playing the game feels represented? Because I think what has happened a lot in the industry is people will look at statistics and numbers and see who your demographic is. And this, they'll say like, this is your player. But we have to step back and say, like, have we made this game only for this player? And who could be our player? And that is even, I think one thing that I struggle with a bit is that at the end of the day, like in the society we live in, like I hate it, but it's kind of like the end goal of the company is to make money. And that is a way that you can frame it while still making sure that you're doing something really good. It's kind of like having the cake and eating it too. It's how you can convince people to get on board with having more diversity and inclusion is when you show them like, hey, look, like people really have an appetite to play this character. And then it's so impactful when you're like a young kid and you're seeing a character that reflects you in the game. So just to sum it all up, I really think like as a community team, we can really advocate for a lot of people, a lot of players whose voices has historically been unheard in the gaming industry, and encourage our design team and our dev team to have processes as well as mechanics that make it more friendly to those players.
Yeah, you put it very beautifully, Julian.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. And yeah, I think another really beautiful thing is, there's obviously the players themselves that, like I said, we're all human. We all have gone through life in our own ways. We come from literally every walk of life, and everyone has, things they're dealing with or a story they want to tell. But that also applies to our actual development team. Like we have people on our team that also have walked that life or have similar challenges. And it's a beautiful marriage of, pushing internally for things such as, inclusivity and, positive social change, and also having that really strong, belief behind it. If you believe in those changes that you're making, it'll come through in your game and your community is going to see that. And it's a scary thing to do, because I think especially through COVID and, recent years, you do hear that unfortunate narrative of, stuff like that doesn't belong in games, or it doesn't belong in this fantasy world. And as a company, as developers, community team, you know, you have to be willing to kind of go through that conversation and stand for what you want your company and your game to believe in when it comes to, you know, speaking about those things and making those changes in the game, because a lot of people do use games as an escape, you know, a way to not think about the real world. But I do believe that it's important that there is, you know, both can coexist, and it's very important for the many players that a game can have to feel a connection in that kind of way, and be able to kind of live out almost their real life in the game kind of way. And you kind of, Julian, I think you kind of touched on that with, you know, your avatar, right? Like that is a symbol of who you are in this universe, and that might be exactly who you are in real life, but you can now express it so much more powerfully in game with these, you know, customizations or tools that this team has given you. And I think that is, as a community person, something I'm very proud of when it comes to video games, seeing, you know, other games and companies really put forth, even though it seems silly, like customization stuff seems silly to prioritize or put into a game, but that's what really makes a character feel like yourself, and that you can connect with that character, and it all kind of ties together in the end, really.
Yeah, I think it's the customization. We've definitely seen a lot more traction and a lot more growth in that space in the past like 4 or 5 years. I feel where you're really being able to see more and more people represented, more and more customization of all, you know, whether it be identity, race, body types, you know, everything is starting to see more and more opportunity spaces there, which is really special, especially in games where, you know, you are living as the character, right? Like gaming is the one medium where you really get to be someone else through that space, or get to live in that space. And so being able to see yourself reflected there is really important.
Yeah, I think, sorry to interrupt you, Matt. One of the
No.
things that came to my mind, like hearing both of you talk, is that I think sometimes, like at some point, the narrative got like flipped a little bit during COVID. And you know, one of the things that even like America was founded on is that like we are strong in our diversity. And I think anybody who's been a part of a collective that has people from vastly different backgrounds realizes is that you are actually so much stronger for it. Like by being challenged and having to question like what you know as fact, you get such a stronger game, a stronger idea, a stronger team at the end of the day. And that is something that like I hope that the narrative gets like brought back to, is that like you're just better for it. Like everybody is better for it. So
Yeah, no, totally agree. And then quickly tying back to like how as community managers we can increase like the representation and diversity in our spaces. I think bringing the players into the development is really important. I'm a big believer in focus groups and even like community led moments within development where it's possible. It's very risky and very tough to get through sometimes, but having those voices be able to connect directly with the people making the games is essential, in my opinion, to make sure that the output is authentic, to make sure that it truly resonates. I mean, if you're not willing to take like the steps to make sure that that's happening, it's not even really worth the effort at the top. Like you kind of got to go all the way to really make sure that it's serving. And I feel that that's super important, and know that that's happened across some things we've worked on in the past, which has been very exciting to see like good response on.
yeah, and definitely fostering an environment where you can really voice like your differences. One of the things that's really honestly been hard for me in my career as I've like continued on is I think I have kind of like approached just this entire space with such a mindset that like, oh, like I have to be like very, very like impartial and like include everything. And maybe I don't talk about this because it's so important to me, because like I have a little bit of a bias there. But I think what is really good is like maybe recognizing your bias and looking at it and sometimes saying, you know, like this is actually something that makes this really authentic for me to talk about, really authentic for us to do, because I do have that bias. And if you bring in people from diverse backgrounds, letting them actually tell their stories is really big. Because I think sometimes we will like companies will try to recruit a lot of different people, but the culture in the community won't allow for you to bring your individuality to like change the community a little bit. So
yeah, I think that that's really important, and you know, you definitely want to be able to have a space where those uh, different biases can really be celebrated and shown. Because, like you said, it might be your perspective on something at that time, but like there are going to be so many people that can benefit from sharing that exact same passion that you have there. So looking back at my sheet, I want to say, looking for like companies that are working towards being more inclusive and supporting more diverse programs, what sort of ways might they want to start working towards that, whether that be events, whether that be working on these focus group things, and then also how can they kind of start measuring to make sure that what they're doing is actually having an effect?
Yeah, that's kind of a tough one because I don't think there's a true measurement of success for these things. You know, when like at the end of the well, in my perspective, at the end of the day, when we're doing these, you know, inclusivity campaigns or whatever it may be, it's not about CCU. It's not about ROI. It's like if I see a player in game that has the pride glyph on, I feel like that's a successful campaign. It's reached one person, it's meant something to one person. Success. And I know that's not like it's not quantifiable, at least for me. Even though, you know, we have a dev team that puts the work into making these things, like um it to me is so much bigger than that. And yeah, I don't know. I can't quantify it. I can't give you like a, you know, I have a tools and graphs that I want to see. I want to see the player base go up. No, I want to see the conversation. I want to see people interacting with it, interacting with me on it, with our team on it, and celebrating it. And that's something that we really try to do around, you know, campaigns like this or conversations like this. Is it's more conversational than it is quantifiable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I
yeah.
think that's totally true. I think that some things are very much qualitative, and knowing that you are having an impact doesn't necessarily rely on data in all assets or in all aspects. And I think that that's one of the things when working with leadership, it's very important to get clear across the top is like, this is something that we're doing for this reason. And like, we're
Right.
not measuring these things.
Like you're
So
not going to
that,
see us on the top of the Steam charts just because we've done this. Like that's not the point. The point is very personal. It's very, you know, opposite side of that.
I think it's also this whole concept within, especially tech and gaming, like there's this debate between like data driven and data informed. And I think this is one of the things where it's like, I think traditionally, like systematic, like racism has been uh it has been extended through kind of like data-driven studies. But what people are missing a lot is that there is a very human context. Like if you're just looking specifically at the data or like looking at the number of players, but like you said, Megan, like even if one person has the pride emblem or like player card, it means something. And sometimes I think what will happen is like internally you might face a little bit of thrash of people might say only 2% of our player base is like LGBTQ. But at the same time, I think what is a huge skill to have as like a community manager is being able to navigate those conversations and being like, hey, this is the data, but this is the rest of the picture. This is the human experience that frames that data. And we do have like an opportunity here to have really impactful uh like have a really big impact on someone's life. And as a result of that, like it could grow our player base quite a bit because it's something that we haven't, it's people that we haven't really listened to or had a chance to be heard before. So yeah, I totally agree that like it's not quantifiable. And I think really letting people know that it's not quantifiable and that maybe this is one instance where like we can be informed by data but not driven by it.
Yeah, love that.
Well said. Oh my God. I'm gonna get that tattooed on my arm.
So let's look at like the communities that we work in, kind of with the knowledge that we have here, and just kind of like the philosophies behind what we work for personally in a community, not necessarily directly for the one game that we work on now, but just like when we are working in community, some of the key things that we're really working towards.
Hmm.
I can kick this one off.
Yes,
I've been
go ahead,
pushing to
Matt.
y'all this whole time, which I apologize for. I've been passing the pressure. So for me, I've always kind of worked off of two principles when it comes to building and working in community, and that's always been educating and elevating. Those two principles have treated me very well, and what that means is educating is giving my community the tools that they need. Uh, it's giving them like the knowledge that they need, resources that they need, and by really working with them and giving them that information or those resources, I'm allowing them to have more meaningful communications, not only with like each other, but with the devs and my team as well. And so it really creates a much better experience for them and helps them really find success and kind of level up what they're doing. Now, what's nice is through that education, it kind of plays into the next part, which is elevating those communities. That's giving them a platform, really working. I focus heavily on micro and nano influencers in the work that I do, and really giving them a space to shine because a lot of those really great, passionate people are in spaces where they don't always get that light. And making sure that they have a platform that is as big as my company can offer at the time is something that I really find is like a superpower of being a community manager and being able to shine that light because I can guarantee that for every micro or nano influencer, that their community is actually double or triple what they represent because they're so isolated in how they communicate and their reach may be so small, whether it be a lack of how to navigate social media and community spaces, or just, maybe it is very, very specific. Maybe there aren't as many Tom Kench fans as I would like to believe, but, making sure that they find a way to connect and get that opportunity to be seen and form those connections is really important to me. So those are the two pillars that I always operate off of what I do.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna steal your format and I'm gonna say connection and collaboration because I think one of the things that happens a lot is um even say on YouTube, right? Like I know of people who would like one of my favorite YouTubers is named FD Signifier. And I have a lot of people in my life who would really enjoy his content, but they have never been fed one of his channels. Like there's a lot of I think what happens a lot is like maybe like algorithms will determine like what type of content you do want to watch. And when we have, especially with games, it's such a unifying passion that we can really transcend like those differences that we have. And especially when we are on the dev team, we have that ability to actually connect that like micro creator to the broader community and introduce a whole bunch of people to someone who has a perspective not only about the game that they're super passionate about, but from a whole different culture that they might not have interacted with before. And then they will naturally collaborate as a community and then grow. And then you're there to, be able to respond and support however you can. So, but I really agree with everything you said too, Matt, about both educating and elevating. I think that's definitely a huge part of it, especially when you're writing communications to players or patch notes, right? Like gotta educate them, elevate them with that
Well,
knowledge.
I love what you said about the algorithm too, and also that you kept with the alliteration theme. Megan, pressure's on. But like breaking people out of those echo chambers that are formed by algorithms, I think is a really like, to keep using an overused phrase, a superpower of community is being able to really break people out of those things that like the algorithm has determined based off of X, Y, and Z broader things that they want to see. Because a lot of the stuff that happens is once you're stuck within that certain space, you're being served the same thing over and over, and you really lose that ability to grow or to be exposed to new things outside of your current thoughts or your current exposure. And so I love that you brought that up as well, because that's something that I think is so often overlooked in a digital space.
I'm gonna break the format just because you
Oh.
put too much pressure on me. No, I'm just kidding. No, I think the one thing that always comes to my mind when I think about, what to strive for when you're working in community, what I've learned over the years is transparency, but also when to be transparent and when, like, there's a line, I feel. And we've definitely tiptoed around that line in terms of, how much do players need to know and how much is meant to kind of keep us safe as developers. And then obviously the other side as well, we're very transparent with our developers as well, and I think that's important. They not everyone gets to see the side that community sees in terms of the outward facing feedback and maybe constructive criticism and all of that. And there's a time and a place where on the community team, you have to be very knowledgeable with your developers themselves on the stuff that they're working on. And, they're passionate about what they're working on. And, sometimes you need to, especially when you're a game that's built on community, you have to have those tough conversations of this might not be well received because X, Y, and Z, and have those kinds of conversations. So, it's always, transparency is a hard thing to kind of own and figure out when and where is the best place to be. But I definitely lean on the more transparent side of things than less. I think that definitely opens up communication with the community and with the players, and allowing that, one-to-one interaction with them, and being very strong in the decisions that you make as developers and as a community team, I think show a lot when you are being transparent about stuff you're changing, or things you're tweaking. If you believe in it, they'll believe in it, and if they're not, they'll tell you they won't. And you can go from there and make any changes that you need to.
Yeah, that's such a good litmus test internally too. And like, I think when you have like a really healthy like relationship with the dev team as well, if you can question them and then make them really hone in, like it makes them think like, oh, okay, like I am very convinced that this is a great change. And if they can, like, usually if I'm kind of like, oh, I don't know about that, but they can convince me. I'm like, okay, like you feel very strongly about this. You have good reasons, even if there are, counter arguments. Like I have a lot of confidence in you when you say that. But I'm reading chat and Otto mentioned like getting noticed by the team can be life-changing. Like 8 years ago, I was playing ARAM on League of Legends, and I was with there was like a rioter in my game, and I was like, oh my gosh, hi. And they're like, hi, hope you're having a great day. And I was like, whoa, they noticed me. And ever since then, like that had a huge effect on me as like a kid, where I was like, wow, that's so cool. And now I'm working at the company, and this brings it back to even like the data decision too, right? Like, do we have statistics of like how like a nice interaction like that can like change the trajectory of the company? That's so intangible. Like, how many other people have you, by like having a nice gesture like that in the community team, or even creating a culture of community in your studio to have that type of interaction? Like, whose lives are you touching? Who are you inspiring to maybe even join the gaming industry? Like, it doesn't have to be that company. It's just, all ships rise. So
yeah. Oh my, that's so true. You say that, like, because we'll sit in public missions and someone would be like, "Oh my God, there's a DE person in here," and I'm like, "Yeah, what's up?" Like, is that? Everyone always thinks it's fake. I don't know why, but there's like, "Is that the real so and so?" I'm like, "Yeah, man, just chilling, just trying to get my grind on. Like, what's up?" And like, yeah, you can't quantify that. You can't. You don't know if that turned into them telling their friend about it, and then their friend gets into it, and their friend gets in. Like, you have no idea. But it's such a feel good moment that it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Totally aligned. I think that also showing that we live in the same space as them is really kind of a key thing. Being able to share that passion really unites you. And I also saw Otto say something about like the dev team being humanized being really important. I think that plays a big part into that as well. I would like to ask if anyone is in chat who wants to have Q&A time, please go ahead and click the Q&A button at the bottom and you can put something there. We don't have any questions currently listed, so I'll keep asking questions until we all do. But something kind of piggybacking off of what Julian brought up, I'd love if you could share a time of like when you witnessed the positive impact of inclusion in a gaming space or a gaming community and how that really affected things.
Oh my gosh. I think one of the biggest ones is probably, I mean, Matt, you know about it, but we had
Yeah.
a player named Rusticles.
I was
Yeah.
gonna bring that up.
Yeah,
I was
we were
gonna
all gonna
gas you
tell Julian's
up. Oh
Julian,
my
you tell
God.
his story. We're all riding this. Yeah.
So the story is, I cultivate a really close relationship with one of the Reddit moderators named Captain Sarah. Captain Sarah sent me a message and was like, did you know that Rusticles is one of our top competitive players in Legends of Runeterra? And she was like, did you know that he's been playing with eye tracking software and has late stage ALS? And I was like, no, I had no clue. Like, that's crazy because we've seen him at the top of the leaderboards. We've seen him competing at every single like seasonal opening, which is our big like competitive tournaments, and he'd always been doing really, really well. And it was kind of just crazy to hear about that story. And like, full disclosure, I mentioned earlier about maybe not leading into like our own biases. Like, I had actually lost my uncle to ALS, and this story really, really hit me hard. And I had a lot of great people, Matt included, who encouraged me to really, really bring this up to all the proper channels and tell all of the people about it within the company so that we could really highlight like Rusticles and who he was as a player. And it really sparked a big, big conversation about accessibility in games and how important that can be. Because I think a lot of times when devs get into crunch time and they're looking at accessibility features, a lot of times they sit in the nice to have bucket instead of the need to have bucket. And I think we can really like flip the script on that and talk about how it is good for everyone and necessary for someone. And when we really situate it that way, we can have moments like one of the beautiful things about Rusticles is that we had the team had developed an accessibility feature for another player who had posted on Reddit who had an adaptive controller, and that same accessibility feature ended up letting Rusticles play too. And it's things like that that are just like it really validates like why I do this as a career and how we can be more inclusive like within a community. So that's the one that comes to mind.
It's like I can't even top it. Like, I remember when you were telling me that story and I was like fighting back tears because I think that is one of the most beautiful inclusivity stories and real life action that I've honestly ever seen in games. And it's been around for a hot minute. I'm old too, Matt, but that honestly, like, it blew my mind, the like above and beyond way that you guys went to include him and the character story that was created behind it. Like, it's honestly incredible.
Yeah, kind of filling in the gap there, like we were able to bring Rusticles actually into the game, which was a really exciting part of it that our dev team was really thrilled about, and the community was very receptive to as well. So it was really exciting to see, not just the company rally behind it, but the community as a whole as well, to really make this a moment of celebration for someone who was so passionate for the game too, and really excited to get to do that.
Yeah, he was an honorary game dev. We got to bring him into the team, make the game with him. It was super dope.
So as we start getting to the tail end of this and doing our sign-offs, I'd like to just kind of like end with everyone getting to say, something that they would like for people either in their communities that they're in, or for any developers or people within like the industry watching, to be able to make sure that their spaces have opportunities for people maybe lesser represented or more inclusion. So I would just love for us to go around and kind of pass that along, the last message.
Yeah, I guess for me, the biggest thing is just if you don't understand something, like ask. And I think just really keeping an open mind, especially when you're building like a community team or you're thinking of the value of community and really making sure that you're contextualizing it within the human experience rather than like purely about data. Um, and really realizing like how much of an impact that it can have on society and also on just being a better product. Just keep that in mind. Okay, actually yesterday, Janelle English did something really, really amazing. And she was saying how working in DEI was always like strange to her because she was an operations like manager who brought her values into work. And that resonated with me so hard because I feel very similarly too. Like I'm a community manager, but I'm bringing my like DEI values into everything that I do. So if everyone can keep that in mind too, because each of our roles actually does have really big impact if you're in the industry.
Yeah, you put it beautifully again, Julian. I don't even know why I'm here. That's
good.
good.
Because you're amazing, Megan. You're a huge inspiration too.
Thank you. Yeah, it is a hard thing to navigate. I think when you look at other companies and games that have put forth, inclusivity campaigns or statements or whatever that is, recognize that that's not a 10-second decision. Like you said, like it's an educational thing as well internally. And not and it because we are from all walks of life, not everyone is going to agree with those decisions, internally and externally. And it's important to have conversations with both of those schools of people, to make sure everyone feels comfortable. And it also, reflects on not only the game, but also the company itself. And when companies make statements or choose to do campaigns and stuff, it is putting a very definitive, this is where we stand on X, Y, and Z. And you have to feel comfortable kind of potentially weathering the storm a little bit on people who don't agree with you. And that's fine. That's all over the world. But at the end of the day, kind of weeds out the people who you might not want to be championing. If I learn that there's someone who I've been supporting for a while that is very opposite and maybe a little negative in that way, it speaks volumes. It really does. And you have to protect yourself, and you have to protect your game and your people around you, and obviously educating yourself. And the classic actions speak louder than words, I think, is also very important, because you can make your black and white statement and move on, but at the end of the day, that's not it.